Well, hello, folks out there in YouTube land. Got a big show lined up for you. Let's get right on into it. All right, folks. Yeah, the SEC is dominating the Sweet 16. They've got a bunch of teams in, and there's several folks. They're not happy about this. They're getting a little tired of the SEC domination. They put up with it for 2 decades in football, but the Big Ten kind of took that mantle this year in the college football playoff, which was surprising to me. But then once you really take a look at NIL and things like that, it did make sense. But now the SEC is dominating in basketball, which is really odd. Typically, the SEC in basketball, the word domination doesn't really fit, but this year it definitely does. And it's annoyed some people because, look, they're tired of dealing with the bully in football, and then all of a sudden the bully shows up at the basketball court. It's going to make you mad.
What, are you going to cry now? Come on, cry, baby, cry for me. Come on, cry.
So I kind of get it, but we're going to talk about that a little bit because it's what everybody's talking about. Now, as many of you know, the SEC got a ridiculous number of 14 teams into the tournament, which just shocked the crap out of me. I mean, we had teams with losing records in the conference, big time losing records. They got in. It's just a matter of the SEC being strong was part of it, other conferences being a little bit weak in places. And I think it also has to do with the fact that there's a lot of teams out there that used to be able to pull a Cinderella or something like that. You can't do that anymore because all the best players go where the money is. And there's a lot of NIL in the Power Four and, of course, the SEC and the Big Ten. So most of the great players are going to go there. So you're not going to have a Dalton Connect at Colorado State that's going to carry them in the NCAA tournament for some period of time. Or a Chaz Lanier, for example. We're talking about Tennessee players that went in the portal. You know, this guy's scoring like 20, 25 points a game in the NCAA tournament. Well, he'd have been doing that for the little team he played for down in Florida. Those days are over, and that's happening all over the country. All the big schools are scooping up the great players.
He ain't lying.
So you wind up with a one-sided 14 SEC. The Big 10 got 8, Big 12 got 7. Then the Big East, which used to be super strong, ACC 4, etc. And that's all of the ones out of the 68. And again, when you look at the SEC, I mean, all of these teams you understand, the Auburn, Florida, Alabama, Tennessee, etc., you know, that made sense them getting in. They've got good records. You know, Tennessee's won 29 games. Florida's won 32, etc. Of course, some of those are from the tournament. But all these made sense. Kentucky, Ole Miss, Missouri. Then it got tricky. You've got Arkansas, who's 8-10 in the SEC, Mississippi State 8-10, Vanderbilt 8-10. They had lost their last 4. Georgia was 8-10, lost their last 2. Oklahoma 6-12, Texas 6-12. So you win 1/3 of your games in the conference, and you got in the NCAA tournament. But what that also does, it sets you up for some early losses because you're talking about teams. These last several teams that got in were on losing streaks. So, of course, some of those are going to get beat in the early on because they had high seeds. You know, the higher your seed, the tougher the game you're going to play. And it just makes it hard to get through the NCAA tournament. So now we wind up with this many teams remaining. The SEC has 7. The Big 12 has 5. And they've had a better record. But again, realize, you know, they didn't have a bunch of teams that had losing records in their conference that got in. And Big 10 still has 4. And then the ACC only has 1. The ACC has just, man, they have struggled like crazy.
What brought you to this lowly stage?
But anyway, these are your teams that are remaining. Now I'm going to show you some folks that are getting a little bit tired of the SEC. I think they're fed up.
And here I thought the SEC is overrated stuff was going to just die in football. You know, kudos to the SEC. They found a way to let everyone throw that chant back at them in football and basketball this year after we watched the first round of the NCAA tournament. And yes, I realize first 2 rounds of the tournament, I realize that I'm saying that as the SEC put a record 7 teams into the Sweet 16. That is very deceiving. And this is very much it's a propaganda war. This is exactly like everything that happens in America these days. You're going to get the SEC touting how great this is. But if you dive into it, very deceptive. Very, very deceptive. This will get both sides to death. You're going to have 2 totally different sides on this. Okay, so.
And that's John Kurtz, and he does a great job, by the way. I'm not sitting here giving him grief or whatever, but look, you know, he's tired of the SEC domination talk. And I know I've seen him covering football. It seems like he's been on TV and stuff. Anyway, And this is another guy that's got a great radio voice or YouTube voice, and he's definitely tired of the SEC domination talk, and he covers Big 12. This is Locked On Big 12.
Yeah, the Southeast Conference has 7 teams in the Sweet 16. That's what happens when you allow the entire league to be there despite schools that were 6-12 in conference play. Almost telling Big 12 schools or Big 10 schools, hey, play as few conference games as you want. The committee is not going to count your conference record. They're only going to count net. So what happened is the SEC had a really good non-conference. I'll give them their flowers there. But when you get into conference play after that, you can only beat each other. So then really what we have to go off of are your non-conference streaks, like how you did in non-conference. So if everybody does well, Oklahoma namely does well in non-con, you go into conference play, and no matter who loses, somebody else won, and that's ultimately going to help them. I look at a Vanderbilt or, again, Oklahoma or Texas. The couple wins that they got helped them get into March because they were beating other SEC schools, and that loss that may have been taken by Mississippi State didn't hurt them, didn't hurt the SEC, I should say, because it was a win for Texas. So it's this inception of college basketball that made the SEC so overblown this year. And part of that, I'm going to go back to the 4 letters, is this ESPN machine that only wants to build up that conference. Again, if you and I had invested in Home Depot, we want Home Depot to succeed. We want Home Depot to win. That's our goal here. The SEC wants the ESPN wants the SEC to win because they have so much money invested in it. So if we spend the entire season talking about how historically good the SEC is, and Joe Lunardi puts the SEC 10, 12, 14 teams in his bracket every week, from there, we can turn national attention to the league. We can make this national perception that the league is elite, historically good, and then 14 teams get in. That is silly and just shows how major media outlets can control what happens in postseasons. And if you disagree with that, you probably wouldn't disagree about the college football playoff, right? So why would you disagree with the NCAA tournament?
Yeah, so there it is. It's really about ESPN. There's a lot of teams out there in conferences that don't appreciate the fact that ESPN pushes their weight around. And they do. They've spent a ton of money on the SEC. Now, granted, they've also got the TV rights for the ACC, so you'd think they'd be pushing them, but the ACC has fallen behind financially because their TV rights money is not very high. And that's definitely played a role. And by the way, that's TJ with College Football Addiction. He does a great job too. These guys do a lot of crossovers. So that's the other guy over there, just in case you were wondering. But anyway, yeah, there's a lot of upset feelings over the SEC now coming into an area where they're really not welcome, and that's basketball. But it is what it is. I know the SEC didn't appreciate the Big Ten, certainly the top end of the Big Ten, coming in and pushing around some SEC teams, me being one of those people. But that's just life. It is what it is, the wins and losses. Granted, I would not have put in the bottom teams from the SEC that went 6-12. If it had been done the way it normally would be, which there being a lot of teams out there that were really good, we would have got like 10 teams in, and 7 of the 10 would still be in. But when you've got 14, you're going to have some teams fall off, which is what happened. But look, when you've got 7 of the 16 teams in the Sweet 16 total, you're the dominant conference. There's no question. And we've dominated the top 5 all year long. Tennessee was number 1 for 5 weeks. Auburn lived at number 1. Alabama was right there for a while as well. And Florida. Florida lived in the top 5. So those 4 teams alone made up the top 5 most of the year, with the exception of Duke and Houston. So anyway, people need to kind of get used to this. It's the way it's probably going to be in the future. The SEC basketball has become a very big thing, and it's not going to be well received. Just go ahead and know there's going to be a lot of folks out there that are not happy about this, and that's okay. I'm here for that. And if you're an SEC fan, you should be here for that as well, and just accept it and just look. Sometimes you got to drink those tears. It's just the way that it is.
Yes! Yes! Oh, let me taste your tears, Scott. Your tears are so yummy and sweet.
Dude, I think it might be best for us to never piss Cartman off again.
And I'm going to give you a breakdown of the times and dates on everything coming up. All right, tonight we've got number 2 Alabama versus BYU at 7 o'clock. Then number 1 Duke is going to be playing number 1 seed against number 4 Arizona at 9:39. All right, then in the West region, you've got Florida playing Maryland at 7:39. And again, this is tonight. And then number 3, Texas Tech, is going to play Arkansas, who's the surprise. I guess that's our Cinderella. And here's the thing about Cinderella. This team, Arkansas, is loaded with more talent than any team in the country. They had the #1 transfer portal team and the #4 recruiting class. So they're not a Cinderella. They have tons of talent. Calipari's a slow starter. It's just the way that he is. But by the end of the year, he's usually pretty good. And then tomorrow night, you've got Michigan State playing Ole Miss at 7 o'clock, 7:09. #1 seed Auburn versus Michigan. That should be a heck of a ball game, 9:39. Now, Auburn, be careful. They might have your signals and signs. You never know. Be careful with Michigan. And then #2 seed Tennessee is going to play Kentucky in a rematch. We have been beaten by them twice in a row because we can't shoot the three against them for some reason. 7:39. And then #1 Houston's going to be playing #4 Purdue at 10:09. My Vols need to shoot better than 17% and 24% from the three-point line. They've been hot recently, so hopefully that was just a bad spell they went through in the middle of the season. We'll find out. That's going to be a heck of a ball game. That might be the most competitive game of the night, really. We'll see. Anyway, if you like this content, be sure to hit that like button. Let's continue to cover all these big college sports stories. And if you have not subscribed, hit this button right over here. I'd appreciate it. It won't cost you a dime. And right over here's the most recent video, YouTube. Thanks, you'll enjoy. And we'll see you next time on Sports Talk Jay.
Come on, sorry, I'm in civics. Come on. Now tell me what. I can't fight with him trying to get at me.